What's up everyone? Alex here. What comes to your mind when you hear the word Concepcion? This is the same question that I asked myself when I got the press release announcing Concepcion Plus. A quick search online revealed a listing of the original game, which never made it to the West. Figures, given that one fan translation of the original game's subtitle was, "Please give birth to my child." I'm not joking. Perhaps it's because of these mature themes that Concepcion would wallow in obscurity, but with the game arriving in the West for the first time with the subtitle Maidens of the 12 Stars, that got me thinking, is there a hidden gem buried in the depths of its deep, dark labyrinths? Concepcion Plus is a class-based dungeon crawler RPG with dating sim mechanics containing a tinge of innuendo and fantasy themes. This review code was provided by Chunsoft. You play the role of a regular run-of-the-mill high school student. One day, in the midst of hearing a confession from your childhood friend Mahiru, the sky suddenly bursts open and sucks both of you in it like a vacuum, transporting you to the magical world of Grandvania. Shortly after your arrival, you are bequeathed the title of God's Gift, an unenviable title that thrusts upon you the task of purifying a labyrinthine system of dungeons whose leaking impurities endangers the lives of everyone in the world. Thankfully, you won't be doing this alone. You'll need to seek the aid of 12 Star Maidens, but not in the way that you think. You'll have to deepen your bonds with them so that when you perform the ritual of classmating, you're able to create powerful star children that can venture deep into these dungeons with you. What ensues is a harem story that'll have you living your new life with 12 Star Maidens, classmating with them from time to time, and forming a veritable army of star children to stop the world's impurities from infecting the land, all the while ensuring that Grandvania Star Maidens are happy. If the idea of classmating and creating star children made you giggle, then the whole premise of Concepcion Plus might be up your alley. Stripped of its premise, classmating is primarily the way you, quote-unquote, recruit party members for your parties. I say parties, because you get to have 3 of them at one time, with 4 members each. The best way to think of these parties is as though they're actually one full party member, whose attacks and abilities can be customized depending on the star children you assign to it. The catch is, of course, that any damage inflicted to a party is shared between its members, and with each star child having their own health and magic points, some might be more susceptible to attacks than others. Thankfully, if your party isn't completely wiped out, you don't need a revive item to bring these star children back to life. You just need to heal them as though they were just badly injured. There are limitations to star children, however, as most of them have a maximum level that caps their growth. Fortunately, this is a good opportunity for you to set them free and work at different facilities that'll aid you with your dungeon runs. While the idea of having to start over with new star children might not sound like fun, I found that careful pairing of low levels with higher level star children will allow you to just literally run through most enemies and gain their experience as though you've fought them. This makes the tedium of having to level lower level star children much more palatable. The cycle of creating star children, going into dungeons, then releasing them into the wild is a gameplay loop that can actually get addicting over time, as it allows you to reutilize all of the hard work you've done to level up your children into yet another conduit that actually recognizes all of that work, effectively making your facilities much stronger and better in the long run. This is an abstraction that represents the growth of a city, that's for sure. But knowing that you helped build all of these facilities, even though this game isn't necessarily a city builder, is kind of a nice feeling. That said, by later in the game, you'll probably have such a surplus of star children that you might be unsure as to what to do with all of them. Silly premise and suggestive nomenclature aside, Concepcion Plus battle system is what truly makes this game for me. Each battle happens on a large 3x3 grid, with enemies occupying a square each. While this might sound like a recipe for tactical RPG goodness, that's really where the similarities end. Players can command their parties, and God's Gift himself, to attack any member on any square. Once you've selected an enemy to attack, you'll then have the choice to attack them from any one of 4 cardinal directions. In fact, certain special abilities can allow you to execute an attack from a direction different from where your parties are actually facing. While your party can warp around the grid during their turn, The enemies on the grid have to respect their location and are forced to move from square to square. This is important to know because careful positioning of your parties then becomes crucial, as you don't want to leave any of your star children vulnerable to attacks from behind. In addition to this, enemies can also charge up for an attack, marking a cardinal direction or two with caution signs, indicating a powerful attack is about to be unleashed. This is where the risk and reward system of the game comes in. By staying your ground and attacking enemies while in these spaces, you can risk building up your chain drive, which, upon filling up, forces all your enemies to lose their turn, allowing your parties to go in for the kill and deal consecutive attacks that not only net you more experience, but also earn you crucial bonding points that you can use to create more Star Children. I wish I could lob the same high praise I had with its battle system and classmating with its dungeons. For the most part, the dungeon crawling is par for the course in the genre, with randomly generated dungeons containing randomly placed items, including traps that slowly chip away at your health, and a rogues gallery of enemies that only introduce a single different variant every time you enter a new branch of the dungeon. Sure, there's the requisite palette swaps that take the same enemy and changes their color to indicate that they're different, but it doesn't compare to the excitement of encountering a new enemy that subconsciously rewards you for progressing to harder, more difficult portions of the dungeon. Also, while trying to engage an enemy on the field, their hitboxes seem inconsistent, as I'll often be surprised to go into battle not knowing why the enemy got the initiative first. This isn't always clear, but I did find that approaching them on their quote-unquote shoulder was an effective way to gain initiative. Criticisms aside, I do find the dungeons to be quite generous when it comes to healing and curative pots and item chests, and while it was difficult to make a ton of money early on, Concepcion Plus gave me enough weapons and armor that this quickly became a non-issue. Also of note, MP regenerative items aren't as scarce as other RPGs, so I felt that my party had enough stamina to withstand some of the harsher enemies of each dungeon. Within reason, of course. Concepcion Plus gameplay systems feel solid enough, but what of its storytelling? As touched upon by its basic premise, the game proper starts off briskly enough. However, due to the need to introduce the various gameplay systems that it has, Concepcion Plus story beats can feel like that they take some time to get to anything meaningful. It's only after the successful clearance of each of the dungeon branches that you'll be rewarded with story sections that flesh out the cast. Unfortunately, the premise itself, the reason why you're here, isn't always addressed, and you'll often find yourself participating in events that were written to either help or further complicate your relationships with each Star Maiden. And the next thing you know, you're off to more dungeoning, or dating, if that's what you're working on. If I had one complaint about the story, is that its use of innuendo is merely to provide flavor to the game and not much else. This might sound like a controversial statement, given that I've spoken to many RPG fans who feel like the games in this series are already taking the innuendo too far. But there's something to be said about stories that fully embrace the absurdity that they wrote themselves into. And more often than not, these types of stories deliver on their concepts well. The further I got into Concepcion Plus' story, the more that these moments of innuendo felt like they were disappearing and fading into the background, with each gag starting to feel like a foregone conclusion that dampens its intended comedy and surprise. It's a pity too, because the localization work for this game is so well done. Over the past several years alone, there have been many great examples of mature comedy in games. Yakuza 0's Mr. Libido comes to mind, that made me look forward to this kind of comedy even more. But sadly, Concepcion Plus holds it in, as it were. Given that Concepcion Plus is a remaster of a Japanese-only released PSP game, I find it necessary to talk a little bit about why the game's story is the way that it is. During Concepcion's original release in 2012, many Japanese games were designed to tamper down on storytelling to allow players to have more gameplay time on the PSP due to its limited battery life. It's because of this that games like Final Fantasy Type 0 and Monster Hunter front-loaded a lot of their story, then designed their game around a mission-based structure to provide bite-sized gameplay experiences while on the go. The trade-off is that these games would push the story forward only after you've gone through a considerable amount of the game to do so. Thinking of Concepcion and where it stands in this idea, its design is similar to an extent, though it substitutes a mission-based structure for a labyrinthine dungeon. That said, Modern dungeon crawler RPGs from this year alone demonstrate that storytelling in the genre has in fact evolved, even on portables. Games like Zanki Zero and Persona Q2 often advance their stories while you're in the middle of your dungeon run, providing new players who don't usually play dungeon crawler RPGs a carrot on a stick, if you will, that encourages them to play further to unlock the game's secrets. Concepcion Plus, even with its many improvements over the original, is still a product of its time. However, much like how Monster Hunter's developers focused on shoring up its gameplay, Concepcion Plus developers did focus all of their potential story work into one of its more important gameplay pillars. In fact, if you told me several months ago that I was going to play an RPG with dating sim mechanics and actually enjoy it, I would have told you that you were crazy. While I had a lot of reluctance with delving into Concepcion Plus Star Maidens, the necessity of having to level them up to create more powerful star children was enough of an incentive for me to think, well, we're doing this anyway, might as well enjoy it. The dates start innocently enough. You thinking, you're just doing this to make more powerful star children, much like our reluctant hero. But after a while, you find yourself genuinely gravitating towards certain Star Maidens. And I'm glad I did, because this is really where the heart of all of Concepcion Plus storytelling can be found. Obviously, each Star Maiden has their own unique quirks and qualities, outside of the obvious starting stats they offer, but their characters and stories are built upon at every opportunity, so you do feel a sort of growth within them. And the more I gave this portion of the game a chance, the more the characters started to endear me, and what was once a choice of selecting which Star Maiden has the best stats quickly turned into a choice of which one I wanted to get to know more. And wouldn't you know it? A lot of the moments of levity and comedy that the game promised and hinted upon early on can actually be found here. Giving life to each of the characters is a wonderful voice cast whose immersive performances and conviction translate well on screen, despite the challenges of presenting in a visual novel-like manner. And if the English voice acting isn't your cup of tea, the game also comes with Japanese voice acting as well. As is the standard for dating sims and visual novels, you'll often find yourself with multiple decisions to say one thing or another, often affecting your relationship with each Star Maiden. Thankfully, Concepcion Plus allows you to save at every important decision, even going so far as to keep track of previous responses you tried before you reloaded your save. Once again, I have to stress that shifting a perspective from, it's part of the game, to, I care about these characters, is a testament to the great writing the developers focused their efforts on, and it's because of this that the dating sim portion of the game stands out as one of its surprising highlights. To say that Concepcion Plus is a niche game is a heavy understatement. It's certainly not a game that I can readily recommend to everyone, and even then, that'll all depend on your tolerance or enjoyment of innuendo. And if you can get through it, and it does become commonplace to the point of being mundane, you'll find an endearing and engaging RPG here, one with uniquely flavored gameplay and wonderful characters as well. And while its clever innuendos might imply that the game is more adult in nature, Concepcion Plus has a charm that will reward many patient players, and one that'll satisfy individuals who can see past its misleading facade.